This is probably the cheapest Nifty 50 lens out there in the market. Well, not really out there in the market. You still have to dig for it and find it. But if you can find it, it usually goes for about $30. So this is a vintage lens, the Minolta MD 50mm f2.0. And this is not by all means a perfect lens, but that's why I like it so much. This is what it looks like by itself. As you can see, it's really small, similar to other Nifty 50s out there in the market, probably even a little smaller than other Nifty 50s. And this is the adapter, which is almost about the same size as this. But this is an adapter that goes from Minolta MD to NEX or NEX for Sony E-mount. So if you wanted to use this lens on a Sony camera, all you need to do is get yourself one of these adapters as well. Keep in mind that this is not an autofocus lens, it is a manual lens. But the cool thing about it is that this lens has markings here that tell you the focusing distance. So that is very useful since there's no auto focusing on this lens. There's also an aperture ring that goes from f2 all the way to f22. You can lock that ring as well. And it is a clicked aperture ring. So you're going to hear that click every time you turn that aperture. So if you're looking for like a smooth sort of aperture control, you're not gonna find that with this lens. It is pretty light, about 150 grams, and it has a filter thread size of 49mm. It has 6 aperture blades, and this is what will emphasize something in the bokeh, but I'll tell you about that later on in the video. So this lens I picked up in a vintage sort of old camera gear store a bunch of years ago, and I recently dusted off and started shooting with it again. I really like the image that comes out of this. This is a Minolta lens, so it is a Japanese brand. So at that time, this is probably the 3rd version. Actually, let me Google that and see. So this is, yes, so this is the 3rd version, the 3rd version 50mm f2.0 that was introduced in 1981. There were other Minolta lenses that were introduced a little bit earlier than this, in 1973 or something like that. There were 2 versions earlier on, but this is the one that I was able to get my hands on. If you're looking for a lens like this, usually you can try used camera stores in your area or eBay, someplace online where you can put a bid on a lens like this, or maybe just buy it for a cheap price. I've seen this lens come across online about 20 bucks sometimes, so it is definitely a super cheap, super bargain option to pick up if you're looking to get a little bit of more character in your lenses. So the problem with newer lenses is that they are too good. They are super sharp, and sometimes you almost get bored of the look. Sometimes I look for lenses that are a little bit older because I feel that you can get a character that you can get with modern lenses. And because they're more imperfect, in my opinion, they give you a bit more of a cinematic vibe or look, if you will. So let's talk about some of the picture quality of this lens. In terms of bokeh, you can see that it's not bad, it's, you know, average, but there is just something about the way the bokeh is in the background that makes this lens stand out a little bit more. If you open up your aperture, you'll be able to see that bokeh is not round, so very imperfect. You actually can see the hexagon in the bokeh, and at certain apertures, you can also see that the circles around the bokeh and also the oniony sort of bokeh, but I actually like that is imperfect in that aspect. Let me know what your thoughts are about that. And before we continue, if you are new here, it would be greatly appreciated if you hit the like button, subscribe if you haven't already. If you already subscribed and you came back, thank you again so much for being here. Chromatic aberration in this lens, when I was looking and pixel peeping at some of my photos, it wasn't very bad actually. It was very not really noticeable. It was only noticeable when I started to pixel peep a lot more. Distortion is very well controlled in this lens, and in terms of sharpness, it is what you might expect with an older lens. But surprisingly, even all the way opened up at f2, the center was still quite sharp and not as soft as I thought it would be. The corners and the center though, they do get sharper as you stop down on the aperture. Lens flares and sunbursts on this lens are also not perfect. They're very imperfect actually, but at the same time, I like the way they looked. So in terms of some of the drawbacks of this lens, obviously autofocus, the fact that it lacks it, the fact that the bokeh is not perfectly round, the fact that you need an adapter for it if you want to adapt it to your Sony camera or any other cameras. But the image quality that comes out of this gets me a different look to what I'm used to seeing online. And when I pair this with mist diffusion filters, I'm really able to get an image that is very pleasant and very cinematic. Again, not a fan of using the word cinematic all the time, but that's what it looks like. And even though the bokeh is not perfectly round, I actually dig the hexagon look on the bokeh sometimes. And sometimes when you look at certain films, you notice too that some of the bokeh is not perfectly round. You also notice that the sunbursts or the lens flares are not that very well controlled, and it actually makes that film or that footage have more character, if you will. I think that sometimes it's good to play around different type of lenses. Older lenses, the benefit is that you get to experiment with different type of imagery. You can get to feel different character or different type of footage that you get from different lenses. And also because it's a manual lens, you get to practice focusing manually, which sometimes is a skill that we may have neglected because autofocus is so good in modern day cameras. I remember when I first started shooting weddings in 2013, I was using a DSLR. The lens had autofocus, but it was terrible for video. So I always would switch it to manual focus and be shooting a wedding focusing manually. And if you have ever shot an event or a wedding, you know that things go by really quick. But that really trained me to be quick at nailing that focus in the short amount of time that I had when capturing something that only happens once. And if you miss it and you're screwed. So sometimes I do get some of these manual lenses just to throw me back to basics and practice manual focusing again. But do you own any vintage lenses or old lenses? Let me know in the comments below. If there is one that you really like right now that is under $50, let me know. I would love to check it out and perhaps pick it up for myself. So anyways, that's it for today's video. Have a blessed day. And here are a couple more videos you should probably watch next, and I'll see you there.